heart that today's press conference is even needed. But the Asian American community has reached a crisis point that cannot be ignored. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the Asian American community has been terrified by the alarming surge in anti Asian bigotry across our nation. In fact, almost exactly a year ago, KPAC held a press conference outside the US Capitol to combat the surge in anti Asian discrimination we were beginning to see at the time due to misinformation and stigma that wrongly associated Asian Americans with the coronavirus. We urge every leader to stick to the advice from the World Health Organization and not associate the virus with a specific ethnicity, country, or geographic region due to the stigma it causes. And we warned that spreading xenophobia would put lives at risk. But our pleas and the guidance from experts were ignored. Donald Trump and Republicans doubled down on using slurs like Wuhan virus, China plague, and Kung flu. And that tactic succeeded in promoting stigma that directed people's anger at Asian Americans. The result? Over 3,000 anti Asian coronavirus hate incidents reported in just the last year. What started as dirty looks and verbal assaults has escalated to physical attacks and violence against innocent Asian Americans. And just as many Asian Americans were preparing for the Lunar New Year over the past few weeks, we saw a surge in anti-Asian violence. And the victims have increasingly been older, like 84-year-old Vicha Ratanabakti, a Thai man in San Francisco who was killed in an unprovoked assault while on his morning walk. In New York, a 61-year-old Filipino man's face was slashed with a knife in the subway. And in just the last week alone, 3 elderly Asian American women were attacked and punched in separate incidents. In Oakland, Chinatown, a camera captured a 91-year-old man being thrown to the ground by an assailant who then went to assault 2 more victims. And I just heard about a Chinese American man being attacked at a bus stop in my district in Rosemead, California, causing him to lose part of his finger. This is becoming almost a daily tragedy. These attacks are no accident. It's clear January 6th was not the only violence Donald Trump incited. That's why last year, KPAC made it a point to call out Donald Trump and his allies every time they stoked xenophobia against the Asian American community. And it's why we pushed for the passage of Congressmember Grace Meng's resolution to condemn anti-Asian sentiment related to COVID-19, which passed the House last fall. We must put an end to this xenophobia. Fortunately, we now have a new president, Joe Biden, who took action within his first week in office to issue an executive order that condemns anti-Asian xenophobia and ensures the Department of Justice works with the API community to address these surging hate crimes. This is why we are asking for a meeting with the Department of Justice to follow up on actions that must take place, something that the previous administration refused to do. We need legislation that helps us respond to the increase in hate crimes and violence. That's why we're calling for a hearing on and the passage of the No Hate Act, which would improve hate crime reporting and provide victims with more support to address these crimes. And we need each of us to do what we can to stop these hate crimes. All of us must be vocal in rejecting xenophobia and racism. We will hold a KPAC hearing on these crimes, and we will encourage Asian Americans to continue reporting hate incidents to sites like the Stop API Hate so we can continue to track and address this violence. And we must look out for each other and speak up when we see prejudice in our communities. That's why I've been so encouraged by the multi-ethnic coalitions that have formed across the country to address this, including the support of the Caucus here in Congress. I encourage you all to help us save lives by standing with Asian Americans and all communities of color as we work to repair our country after years of division. Thank you. And now it is my honor to introduce our incredible Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. As a Californian, as Speaker, I'm very proud of you and the work that you have been doing relentlessly on this score for a long time now, and especially the last 4 years where this has become such a blot on our country. I thank you for referencing the president's executive order of January 26th, and I just want to read for a moment, because I think, as you said, you're going to the Justice Department. The Attorney General, according to the executive order, the Attorney General shall explore opportunities to support consistent with the applicable law, the efforts of state and local agencies, as well as AAPI communities and community-based organizations to prevent discrimination, bullying, harassment, and hate crimes against AAPI individuals, and to expand the collection of data and public reporting regarding hate incidences against such individuals. I read that for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm glad that they're connecting with the community-based organizations, AAPI community, but also we have to inform people about how to report a crime. There's I know Grace Mann will probably speak to this in New York. A man just pushed a woman in her 50s. They describe her as old, I describe her as young, pushed a woman, Asian American woman, and then on this, Olivia Moon, she put out the word on, and other celebrities put out the word on social media. The police, New York police, she gave them credit, found him very soon, but they didn't know whether it was a hate crime. So what we need to do is for people to be sensitive at the time to take down the words, because that the difference between just bullying and harassment, and that would be horrible enough, and a hate crime is we want to document the hate crimes. The Islamophobia is also another part of the Asian Pacific assault. So I'm so glad to join you in commending the entire Tri-Caucus, and I see Barbara Lee representing the Congressional Black Caucus and so many other things she represents, and Mr. Gomez representing the Hispanic Caucus, because this is a joint effort. White supremacy is the biggest bucket of concern when it comes to domestic terrorism. So this issue is specific to these individuals and how we want to help them, but it's also part of a bigger picture. And that, don't take that from me, that's what the director of the FBI said in September when he was describing what are the challenges in terms of domestic terrorists. The biggest bucket, white supremacy and the well, everything that is involved there that you address much of. I just want to say, as a San Francisco representative, how proud we are of our community and the entire Bay Area, right, Barbara? Our mayor, Mayor Breed, has taken every occasion to speak out against this anti-Asian, and as recently as this weekend, a rally in front of City Hall. As we celebrate the Lunar New Year, source of joy, it's also a source of pain for us at this time because of all of these incidences. So I'm proud locally of our mayor, I'm proud of our president and for what he is doing, and the priority he made it very early in his administration. And I'm also proud of our House Democrats and our Tri-Caucus, led by you, Madam Chair. You have been relentless in all of this. I see Mr. Takano, he has joined you in that relentlessness. Mr. Liu, Mr. Kim, Grace Meng, thank you for acknowledging her important legislation. So we're very blessed in our caucus with the beautiful diversity. I always say our diversity is our strength. Our unity is our power, and we have unity on this subject. So thank you for the opportunity to salute you in this precedent, to call attention to something that must be stopped. And it's starting at the top with our new president changing course on this subject and being supported by all of you in the Congress. Thank you. Thank you, Judy Chu, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, for attending this press conference despite your incredibly busy schedule. I know that you have to leave, but you honor us with your presence.
Honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And for any reporter, again, put the question in the chat box and we'll take it up later. But now we have our esteemed chair of the House Democratic Caucus, somebody who joined us last year also to call for an end to this violence, the Congressman from New York, Hakeem Jeffries.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Chu, for your incredible leadership and once again bringing us all together. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to all of my distinguished colleagues. You know, the House Democratic Caucus is a family. We're a big family. We're an enthusiastic family. Above all else, we're an incredibly diverse family. We're diverse in terms of race and gender and sexual orientation, religion, region, ideology, life experience. Above all else, we are a family. And we stand with each other when members of that family are facing a crisis. And the Asian American community right now is facing a crisis of hatred that we cannot tolerate. And we stand with you, Judy and Grace and Andy and Mark, all of our community leaders, and we stand with the Asian American community across the country. What is happening is a complete and total disgrace. Cut it out. And we're going to make sure that those who are perpetrating this violence are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. We have to make sure that everybody gets the message loudly and clearly that we will not tolerate anti-Asian bias. We will not tolerate anti-Asian bigotry. We will not tolerate anti-Asian hatred. We will not tolerate anti-Asian conspiracy theories. We will not tolerate anti-Asian xenophobia. We will not tolerate these hate crimes. Dr. King has made clear that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So all of us stand with the Asian American community until we can put this scourge to an end. And we will, because goodness in America always prevails, but it requires good people to stand up and unify. And that's what we'll continue to do with our Asian American brothers and sisters. So thank you so much, Chairwoman Chu, and to all of my colleagues for your continued support and leadership at this critically important moment in time for our Asian American community.
Thank you so much, Representative Jeffries, for your strong words. We truly appreciate it. And now I'm so privileged to introduce Representative Barbara Lee, a leader in both CAPAC and the Congressional Black Caucus, who represents the Bay Area where so many of these attacks have been occurring.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Judy Chu, for your constant and consistent leadership in terms of making sure that you remind us that what affects one affects all. And I have to salute our speaker because she gets it instinctively and clearly understands why she has to lead our caucus to really educate and make sure that everyone joins together with the Asian Pacific American community in beating back this hate and this divisiveness and this violence that's taking place throughout the country. And so I am just pleased to be with you. I'm sorry we're here again because this should not happen in America. We know that the divisiveness and the xenophobic rhetoric of the last 4 years have really polarized this country even further. On top of that, the COVID-19 pandemic sparked a racist misinformation campaign by the previous administration, which has unfairly stigmatized AAPI communities, putting individuals, businesses, and families at risk. Now, according to Stop AAPI, which of course we all know is a national organization that's been tracking the rise of hate crimes against AAPI individuals due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been nearly 3,000 incidents of anti-Asian discrimination across the United States. And that's between March 19th to December 31st, 2020. Now, in California alone, Stop AAPI Hate recorded over 800 discrimination and harassment incidents against Asian Americans. This is just in the span of 3 months, including 81 assaults and 64 potential civil rights violations. And what's worse, these numbers likely represent only a fraction of the actual number of crimes. Many crimes go unreported due to fear, due to language barriers, lack of resources, and differences in law enforcement strategies and investigations. Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have made our nation more secure during this coronavirus. An estimated 2 million Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have served on the front lines of this crisis, as healthcare providers, as first responders, and as other essential roles. We have got to stop we've got to stop our work and do what we need to do to put a stop to hate and violence. This requires us to see this as an emergency and make it a priority. These tragic attacks are happening in communities across the country, and unfortunately in my own community in Oakland, California. These attacks are just simply unacceptable. And so, as stated in the resolution, Representative Meng's resolution condemning all forms of anti-Asian sentiment related to COVID-19, we've got to make sure that we recommit ourselves to the goals of this resolution and prioritize language access and inclusivity in all of our communication practices, and to combat misinformation and disinformation that put Asian Americans at risk. And so, Chairwoman Chu, this is so important. It's so important that the Caucus understand that what affects one affects all. And as an African American woman, I just have to say to you, this is an issue that we know so well in the Black community, unfortunately. And it's an issue that we cannot just turn our back to and just say to you, we stand in support. We're going to do everything we can do to stop this. And as Speaker Pelosi said, underlying all of this is what we know, and that's white supremacy and how this has risen to the surface now. And we see this now in the unfortunate and tragic violence against the AAPI community. So thank you again for giving us a chance to be with you, but we stand in solidarity with you, and we intend to do everything we can do in making this a priority to stop this violence and hate against the AAPI community. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Congressmember Lee. Our next speaker is another colleague from California, here representing the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and is also a proud CAPAC member, my friend, Congressmember Jimmy Gomez.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Chu, for the introduction. I'm proud to represent the Congressional Hispanic Caucus to stand shoulder to shoulder with our colleagues in CAPAC, but also the residents that we all represent. California is an amazing state because we have communities from all over the globe. In my congressional district alone, I have Koreatown, I have Chinatown, I have historic Filipino town, and multiple other communities. And that's what makes LA and California such a rich place. But right now, because of the leadership of Donald Trump and the previous administration, try to scapegoat the AAPI community for the coronavirus pandemic. And that was shameful from the beginning, because it's once again trying to make a complex problem solved by a simple solution like hate. That is completely unacceptable. And this hasn't stopped. I have a constituent who wrote me a letter, an email, just recently, a couple of days ago, said that she was robbed because she was Asian of thousands of dollars. She was trailed home from the bank. They followed her as she parked her car at her house, and she was robbed. And she wanted to say that this is completely unacceptable, that she's getting targeted because she's Asian, that she's getting targeted because it's the Lunar New Year. She's getting targeted because she is quote unquote an easy prey. But one thing she said is like, they maybe stole the thousands of dollars, my purse, but what they can't steal from me is the dignity that I have, the support of my community, and the love of my community. That's what we're here to say, that what happens to anybody in our community happens to the rest of us. So I stand with my constituent who went through that horrible situation. We reached out to law enforcement about this incident, and it's more common than people think, and it's definitely going on at a higher rate right now than previously. So we're going to be doing what we can to fight back. But one of the things she also wants us to do, and maybe the timing is just the timing, she wants more people to know what's going on. She wants people to be aware and the representatives to be aware. So we're going to get her story out in order to combat the violence that the AAPI community is facing. With that, Chairwoman Chu, I yield back.
Thank you for those incredible words, Congressmember Gomez. We really appreciate it. And now I'm proud to introduce CAPAC's first vice chair, the Congresswoman from New York, Grace Meng.
Thank you, Chairwoman Chu. Thank you for your fearless and tireless leadership and advocacy, not just within our AAPI community, but in strengthening our coalitions with our shared communities as well. I want to especially acknowledge and thank Speaker Pelosi and Chairman Jeffries for joining us here today. It means a lot to each of us and our communities that both of you would be here. And of course, to our Tri-Caucus allies, our Congressional Black Caucus and Hispanic Caucus, for your allyship and your presence here. To Barbara and Jimmy, this solidarity means a lot to me and to our whole community. And as Judy said before, you have been here for us since the very beginning of when this was happening. We had press conferences early on last year in the spring when we were already seeing and witnessing these sorts of hate incidents and crimes. And the Tri-Caucus was there with our community from the beginning. For over a year, our community has been fighting two viruses, not just the COVID-19 pandemic, but that of anti-Asian hatred and discrimination. And I will say, and I want to say this to our AAPI community as a whole, whether you are a first-generation immigrant or you've been here for multiple generations, it is crucially important that we stand with each other and with other communities to support each other. We cannot let people divide us, and we must make sure that we continue to support each other. And again, that's why I'm so thankful for the leadership and the allyship of our Tri-Caucus being here. There have been over 2 million AAPIs fighting on the front lines. It broke my heart to hear how Asian American healthcare workers put their lives on the line, but only to live in fear of racist attacks every single day. The recent spike in violence against Asian Americans, especially against the elderly, resulting in even death, is especially horrifying. Just this week in my own district in Queens, a woman was attacked. And these are our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors. These acts of violence against them are unacceptable, and the perpetrators of these crimes must be punished. Last year, I introduced House Resolution 908, a resolution that condemned all forms of anti-Asian sentiment, which passed the House of Representatives in September. And I want to thank Speaker Pelosi, Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, for getting that resolution through the House. And I was really happy, as was mentioned before, to see that President Biden incorporated some of my bills into his presidential memorandum to address anti-Asian sentiment and hate crimes against AAPIs. It's a really important, positive, and initial step forward, but we must continue to speak out whenever and wherever anti-Asian hate crimes arise. We demand this xenophobia and violence end at once. We can't and we must not be idle. This terrorizing of Asian Americans, especially our elderly, must stop. And I call on every single person to put an end to these acts of hate. Call it out, prevent it, report it. We need every person to step up and stand against it. We are better than this. Our diversity has always made us stronger. We cannot and must not ever lose sight of this. So thank you everyone for being here today.
Thank you so much, Congressmember Meng. And next, because I know he has something pressing to do, we would like to hear from our CAPAC whip, my friend, California's representative, Congressmember Ted Lieu.
Thank you, Chairwoman Chu, for holding this important press conference. Thank you, Rep. Takano, for letting me go first. I appreciate it. And I want to thank Speaker Pelosi, Chairman Jeffries, and also Representative Jimmy Gomez for supporting this conference. As we showed during their impeachment trial, violence doesn't just happen out of the blue. It takes months and months of inflaming prejudices and passions, and that's what the former president did. And when it comes to Asian American community, he spent months and months and months of inflaming prejudices and passions against the Asian American community through racist terms like Kung Flu. And when that happens, it does turn parts of the American population against the Asian American community. The former president showed that words can kill, and his already have. Thank goodness we have a new president now who, as Chairwoman Chu mentioned, put an executive order to counter attacks against Asian Americans and other racist conduct. It's important that we get the Department of Justice to do more. So when the Senate Republicans stop their obstruction and we get Merrick Garland confirmed, we're going to send another letter to the Department of Justice. Last year, we sent one to the former Attorney General asking him to do more. It was a bipartisan letter of 150 members of Congress, including everyone here. And we're going to get Marilyn Strickland on this new letter this time as well. I also wanted to point out that all racism is toxic, but this particular racism is really stupid. I am not a virus. There is no evidence that Asian Americans transmit the virus at any higher rates than any other ethnic group. And you're much more likely to get the virus from people who engage in risky behaviors, like not wearing a mask in public. So let's just get real here and deal with the actual scientific facts. And then let me conclude by saying what we're seeing now is not out of the ordinary in terms of historical context. When Americans have been faced with external threats and fear has been whipped up, Asian American community has been gone after, from the yellow peril hysteria to Chinese Exclusion Act, to the internment of over 100,000 Japanese Americans, to the murder of Vincent Chen. What we're seeing today is simply people getting riled up with their prejudices and passions against the Asian American community, and it's just got to stop. And hopefully prosecutors will prosecute those who engage in hate crimes to the fullest extent of the law. Thanks so much again for having me on.
Thanks so much, Congressmember Liu. And now we'll have KPAC's second vice chair from California, Congressmember Mark Takano.
Well, thank you, KPAC Chairwoman Judy Chu, for organizing this press conference. Thank you to Speaker Pelosi and Chairman Jeffries, and for our colleagues Barbara Lee and Jimmy Gomez for showing the multi-ethnic and multiracial coalition that we have to speak out on this issue today. I just want to remind everyone that today is the day of remembrance, as we shed light on the rise in hate crimes against the AAPI community. We dedicate this day to the nearly 120,000 innocent people who were wrongfully interned by our government solely because of the color of their skin, the shape of their eyes, and their Japanese heritage. That dark time in history is something that we must reflect on often. Reckoning with our history and discussing our nation's errors empowers us with the truth and allows us to empathize with those to whom injustice was done. And what the AAPI community is experiencing today, right now, compared to what Japanese Americans experienced almost 80 years ago, I just realized my camera was off. But is it on or off?
Now it's on.
Oh, okay, great. It didn't indicate it was off before. What the AAPI community is experiencing today compared to what Japanese Americans experienced almost 80 years ago may be different, but the root cause of it is the same: scapegoating and mass blame. And what we're discussing here today isn't new in America. Hate and discrimination against the AAPI community has been a long-standing problem, but it has been made far worse by the pandemic, and because powerful leaders like Trump and Republicans who enabled him spread fear, misinformation, and racist rhetoric to advance their political agenda and cover up their incompetency in response to this virus. And my colleague Ted Lieu is correct. This rhetoric was deliberate and it was sustained, and it had an object. It was to cover up the incompetency of the last administration in response to the virus. Words have consequences, Actions by political leaders have consequences, and we're seeing the consequences of the use of terms like China virus or Kung flu in hate crime data. In the first 6 months of the pandemic, Stop AAPI Hate recorded more than 2,500 hate incidences against AAPI people. And recently, we've all read about the horrific unprovoked attacks against AAPI elders, including Wichar Ratanapakdi, an 84-year-old Thai man who was attacked while walking in San Francisco and who later died of his injuries. Those staggering statistics and the stories behind them are sparking outrage and forcing activists, community members, and political leaders alike to condemn this violence and demand action to address these rising incidents of hate amid the pandemic. I want to commend the Biden administration for acknowledging the rise in AAPI hate crimes and for pledging to address it. My KPAC colleagues and I stand ready to work with him to protect vulnerable members in our community. And Congress can also take action by passing the No Hate Act to bolster community resources and combat hate crimes. Unlike the leaders of our past who remain silent in the face of atrocities like Japanese American internment, we will speak out to condemn these attacks. It's up to all of us to fight back against ignorance, bigotry, and ensure that the AAPI community is not scapegoated or assigned mass blame. I want to apologize for the camera going off and on. It just seems like we're having, what's going on is that my regular device, the link doesn't work, but I had to switch to my iPad as I'm going back and forth between the text. And as I found out, we switch to a different window, it turns the camera off. So I'm back, but hopefully our folks in media can still use the comments. I yield back.
Well, thank you so much, Congressmember Takano. We heard your words, and that's what counts.
Thank you.
And now, one of KPAC's younger stars, Congressmember Andy Kim from New Jersey.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, everyone, for joining up here. I want to just start by what it was that really seared into my memory from the last couple of weeks, which is just the attacks against the elders. The image in particular of the 91-year-old man being pushed, his body literally airborne because of just the sheer force with which he was assaulted. That I saw that, and I saw in that image someone that could have been my father or my grandfather. I saw it was very personal. And it lingered with me in a way that few images really do. And I really want to underscore that there's something particular about this moment because of these attacks on our elders. We're not saying that that's the totality of what we're concerned about, but that in conjunction with Lunar New Year, which is a time of year where I visit my parents and we visit our elders, we show our respect to them. We show and recognize what it takes for us to see that we did not get where we are on our own, that it was those especially brave parents and grandparents that were often the ones that immigrated to our country, to America, took on with such courage. And they are the ones that are being attacked because of just walking down the street. So I just want to just take a step back and just have that really land for us about what that means for all of us, but what that particularly means for the API community to see our elders attacked in that type of way. I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks trying to talk to different communities around the country about what specifically they need and what specifically they feel like they're missing to address this issue. And there's just 2 points I just want to raise here. One is about a simplified system for reporting. People don't know where to turn to. When they experience something, they don't know where to go to. And yes, we've talked about some of the different ways in which things can be reported, but there needs to be a much more systematic, unified, and simplistic way for people to understand who to turn to when there is a problem, and to understand what it will be followed up by that going forward. The second aspect of this is the recognition that this problem cannot be addressed by any single level of government alone. Yes, I'm certainly very proud that the Biden administration has moved forward with the executive memorandum. That is a start. It's a good start, but we need to build out further. And we in Congress certainly need to take actions like the No Hate Act and others, and holding hearings, raising up the profile of this. But I've also been engaged with local mayors, with governors' offices and others saying, what do you need? What is the assessment that you all have about what it is that you need? We need that punch list of understanding. Is this more resources for local community outreach, for law enforcement, for others? And I think that there needs to be just a much more systematic discussion across the board for that, and having different states put together their own plans on how it is that we can combat hate crimes in our country. So I just wanted to point out those particular issues, because a lot of people have been asking us what specifically needs to be done. And yes, we are listing off a few other things, but I wanted to share with you what the community experience has been. You know, what are they talking about, and what is it that they feel like are missing? And I think that's an important aspect to highlight. So with that, I'll yield back to Chairwoman Judy Chu.
Thank you for that feedback. We really appreciate it. Before we get to our last speaker and move on to Q&A, I want to let you know that if you do have a question, let us know in the chat, and you will be called upon. Now, our last speaker is also one of our newest, a member of both our Congressional Asian Pacific Caucus and the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland from Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to leadership for joining us today. And I am so proud that the Tri-Caucus is getting together to denounce these attacks and talk about a unified approach to ensuring that people are held accountable. As all the speakers have mentioned earlier, whenever there's a crisis in America, there is a history of wanting to blame people. And in this case, it is violence against the AAPI community. And as described earlier, watching our elders get hurt and become victims of violence hits us in a very, very different way because of our culture and how much we honor and respect our elders. But I also want people to understand too, there's the psychological violence of the bigotry. It is a friend of mine who works in a nursing home who's told by a patient that he doesn't want her to touch him. It is someone standing in line at a grocery store who has people step away from them and has them call names. It's people being told to go back to where they came from. And that type of bigotry requires our allies and for us to speak up. We know that as members of the AAPI community, there's often this idea or this stereotype of the model minority. And that model minority often comes with the idea that people are going to suffer in silence and say nothing. Well, it's a new day. We are speaking up, we are unified, and we want people to be held accountable. I remember doing some of the research and I saw a letter that Judy Chu wrote back in July talking about these hate crimes. And here we are in February having this conversation and watching this fight continue. So I'm first of all grateful that the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and our caucus is standing together to address this issue. But as Andy Kim said, we need action. People need to know where to go to report this, and we want to see consequences for this behavior or it will continue. If we think about the fact that we just celebrated the Lunar New Year, it is incredibly tragic that these crimes are spiking at this very time. As a country, we know we're better than this, but as a country, we know we have a history of violence. That includes the insurrection on the Capitol, it includes excessive use of force by police officers, and it includes this. So as we come together, let's make sure that all of our communities are treated with respect and dignity, but also let's make sure that we are standing up, that we're speaking out, and more importantly, that our allies are calling it out when they see it. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. And again, I'm proud to be part of this Tri-Caucus effort.
Thank you so much for those very moving words, Congressmember Strickland. And now we would like to begin our Q&A.
Okay, our first question comes from Nicholas Wu with the USA Today.
Hi there. Thanks you so much for holding this. I had a question about the letter that you wanted to send to DOJ on following up on this. You mentioned that last year you sent the letter and got a significant amount of Republican buy-in. Any luck on getting Republicans to sign on this time around?
Well, we are hoping that they will sign on again. And also, we are going to be starting a bipartisan API caucus, and we hope that those members will sign on as well. Also, we did have 14 members of Congress that did vote to support Congressmember Grace Meng's anti-Asian bias resolution. So I do believe that there is a possibility of getting bipartisan support on this.
Okay, our next question comes from Tal Kopin with San Francisco Chronicle.
Hey guys, I'm hoping you'll let me ask 2 questions. One is just to confirm, I heard a lot of the speakers. It sounded like you're all sort of directly blaming Donald Trump for this rise in attacks. And I wanted to make sure that that is in fact what you are trying to say. Secondly, we at the Chronicle have reported that Oakland Chinatown is now hiring private armed security in response to this wave of attacks. Obviously, you listed some policy goals, but I'm wondering if you think there's any more that can be done in a very immediate sense to help protect some of these communities that feel very, pressing concern about their safety.
Well,
Are there others?
Can I?
Yeah, Grace or Andy? Andy.
Yeah, well, look, I just want to address the first point, first question. I think all of us agree that the former president's comments and words and actions certainly has inflamed this situation, but I don't think any of us would also say that we didn't experience or haven't seen anti-Asian bias or discrimination prior to the last couple of years. So I just want to be very direct here because I get asked that question a lot. Yes, the former president did certainly inflame these situations and certainly has some responsibility to this, but it's not totality of this all. There is a deeper level of xenophobia and bias and discrimination that is harbored within our country that we certainly need to dig in deeper on. So I just want to make sure that while we look at this, we don't just try to attribute it just simply to one person. This is certainly a deeper systemic problem that we face.
If I could add, Judy, sorry.
Okay. And then it's Marilyn. Yeah, Mark.
Okay. Well, we can't, I wouldn't lay the totality of the blame on President Trump, but I would lay a good share of it for this particular time period. Representative Kim is correct that this sort of bias, is latent throughout, I think, American society, and it gets worse or less worse depending on the moment. It's a generalized sort of sentiment, often involving the particular heightened rivalry with one of the East Asian nations. For example, in the 1980s, there was an increasing sense of rivalry with Japan and the Japanese automakers, and that caused some unemployment among the Detroit automakers, and some white out-of-work automakers blamed and attacked a guy named Vincent Chin, who was not Japanese, but Chinese. There was no distinction made between Japanese, Chinese, or Korean, or Thai, or Southeast Asian. The East Asian racial characteristics get generalized by a segment of the population. Not all Americans have this attitude, but enough Americans will respond in this way. And this sort of reaction is heightened by irresponsible leaders who inflame the moment. So yes, so no, not everything can be attributed to former President Donald Trump, but yes, a great deal can be. And as Ted Lieu said, it was sustained for several months. It was a strategy to deflect from their inadequate response to the coronavirus and to lay all the blame on China. And so words like Kung Flu is an incredibly adolescent term. You would expect an 8th grader, but even a lot of 8th graders also would be ashamed to see it and would be ashamed of a classmate who would use it. But yet we saw Republicans en masse rise to the president's defense and enable him. So it wasn't just the president, it was also Republican enablers. I think it'll make a huge difference to see responsible leadership at the top level of our government. And you cannot underestimate the impact that responsible leadership has on the share of the public that may not be as educated, may not have their attitudes shaped in such toward such civil responses. So let's not underestimate the power of responsible leadership.
Marilyn?
Yeah, and very briefly, we cannot completely blame the former president for this, but you cannot deny that his words and actions gave people permission to be overtly racist and bigoted. And it starts with words, and then it starts to become physical violence against people. And the people around him who are his enablers, as Congressman Takano just said, sitting there silently when they know it's wrong. And so do you blame it on one person? No, but he gave people permission to be openly racist and openly bigoted, and it manifests itself in violence.
Okay, our next question comes from Jolene Kent with NBC and MSNBC.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to do this. Beyond Representative Mung's resolution, I know you're all calling for action here. So I was wondering, what is the concrete plan and next step forward for legislation to address and reduce these incidents? Has there been any specific discussion within the Tri-Caucus or individual caucuses to draft legislation that would be more than Representative Mung's resolution here? Thank you.
So I have.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Well,
sorry.
Well, let me first say, we are emphasizing passage of the No Hate Act. The No Hate Act was included in the HEROES Act and the updated HEROES Act, which did pass out of the House. So that was a major step forward. But now now that the HEROES Act has not passed, and signed into law, we need to make sure that there is a hearing on it in the Judiciary Committee and that it does pass. Why is the No Hate Act so important? Well, in 1990, there was a federal law passed to require the FBI to track and tabulate hate crimes, but it doesn't have any teeth. The reason is because the FBI relies on the local jurisdictions to submit their hate crime statistics, and the local jurisdictions are very, very different in terms of whether they collect or not. Some don't collect at all. Some are very proactive. And in fact, there are 3 states where there aren't even hate crime statutes. So we need to have consistency across the states if there is going to be any meaningful reporting on hate crimes. But the No Hate Act also provides resources to different jurisdictions so that they can properly train their law enforcement officers, and so that there can be resources to do such things as a hate crime hotline.
I just want to add a little bit to that, everything that Chairwoman Chu said. And in terms of the resolution that the House passed, and in terms of President Biden's executive memorandum, those were important steps, but those were initial steps. So the resolution and the executive memorandum both symbolically condemned bigotry against Asian Americans, and also directed federal agencies to work, for example, to collect more data and statistics on these types of incidents and hate crimes that were happening, and also to provide to another question that I saw somewhere in the chat, to provide COVID-related information and resources in multiple languages. So that's what the memorandum and our resolution contained, and they were important steps, but first and initial steps.
Do you feel that you have enough support from the Republican side to pass what you need?
Well, like I said, we got 14 members of Congress to support the resolution. And we think that it's only a matter of fairness to be able to get this across the finishing line. After all, there are significant populations of Asian Americans in so many states all around the nation, and in states that truly matter and that made a difference in this last election. So we are hopeful that this can happen.
Judy, could I just add something in response to the Chronicle question regarding what can be done now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I will reemphasize that a change in leadership is what can be done now. And we do have a change in leadership from the top. And that sets a big tone. So that is really a very important general thing that can be done right now, and it is being done now. And I think the speaker and Andy Kim, Representative Kim, also raised the point about training the community, especially our community that has language barriers, on how to report a hate crime and to pay attention to the words and language used around that crime. Because that's an important distinction in terms of the evidence that is able to be introduced in court, to actually record down the words, take down the words of what people said.